and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. Here at Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. I am Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer at the Center for Victory. Today, I tell you what, I am so jacked and pumped to be interviewing this guy today, and you're going to want to listen to this and watch this over and over again. Mr. Brett Pyle is with us today. Thank you for being here, buddy. And I can't even get words out right now how excited I am for everybody to hear you. We've been friends for a long time, even visited the San Diego Zoo together. I've heard you speak a lot, and I love what you're all about. And I want you to share that today, because we've been talking about this past month at Center for Victory. We've been talking about 2020 vision this whole month and what that means. And for you to come in and wrap up this month is great, because you're going to talk about your extraordinary why. Now, let's just back up and say that you've just completed that first book called Your Extraordinary Why, Living a Successful Life of Significance. And it's all about helping people find their why and connect deeply to their purpose. So that's probably the best place to start with why. Why did you write the book?
Oh, man, thanks for asking. And I will dive into that, but I can't do it without also sharing some of the fact that we are in the midst of a bromance here, man. I've known you for, 3 years or something like that. And from the moment we first met, I'm like, I love this guy. And there was just something about your countenance that just sucked me in. And so anyway, I'm so thrilled that you had asked me to come along, and thanks for having me on the program. All right, so why did I write the book? Great question. And I'll tell you this, that the book has flowed out of what I will call nothing short of complete and utter disobedience to what I knew I was supposed to do. And I mean that with all sincerity. I knew in my spirit, I was told to write. I heard it 10, 12 years ago. Write, Brett, you need to write. And my first response was, I got nothing to write about. And they're like, write. So I'm like, okay. So I tried writing, and I got down a few paragraphs. And what I discovered was I could write the heck out of a paragraph. But producing content, which I sensed I was being led to do, I couldn't do, because I was plagued by this other demon back here, and it was called perfectionism. And so I would write a paragraph, and I'd get stuck on making that one paragraph perfect, that I never was able to produce a page or 2 pages. And so I wrote, and then I just kind of quit writing. And I quit for long enough that what I also then heard in my spirit was, okay, well, if you're not going to write, you need to speak. And I heard that, but I'm like, I don't really have anything to say. And then, so we met through this the CEO peer advisory board thing that we were both a part of, separate ones, right? I was leading 2 or 3 of them here in Greenville, South Carolina, and you were a member of one up in Pennsylvania. And it was my group that would say, Brett, you need to not just be our chair, our convener, but you need to start speaking to other groups. So now I'm getting a second message, this time from people, something connecting with something I knew I was supposed to do. But I replied to them out loud. I'm like, guys, I got nothing to say. And they're like, yes, you do. Just say the sort of stuff, that you're saying to us when you're coaching us. And Eric, when I heard that, immediately, the thought that went through my head was, oh my gosh, I'm coaching completely wrong. If, I'm not supposed to be speaking if I'm coaching. And so these guys are saying, you go speak somewhere else so we can get a word in edgewise. So finally, I'm like, all right. So I pulled together this talk, and it was connected with work that I'd been doing for a while, which was helping people set goals. And I wanted them to set goals from their why. Why are you doing this thing? And yet I felt almost hypocritical about doing goal setting workshops, because internally I had gotten to the point, and I was in my, at this point, mid to late 40s, where I had achieved a lot of goals and things that I wanted to do. And yet I found that some of the things that I wanted to do, frankly, I did them, and I found them unsatisfying. And so the program I had on my heart to envision was helping people set goals that would actually matter at the end of the day. Not just, what do you want to do? But what if you want to do is disconnected from what that larger force around you and in you and through you is doing? And if there was a disconnect between those two things, how would you even know? And so I literally went into a period of time of 3 years where I was helping people set goals while simultaneously having only one goal of my own, and that was to have absolutely no goals, but to be available to the Spirit and the Spirit's leading in and through me. And as I went through that process, this is what got birthed, was this talk that I had pulled together for other CEO groups of setting goals in a conscience-driven way. And literally, I was kind of living that out during that period of time. And now here, 10, 12 years later, this talk has just exploded, and I do it. I've done it probably 700-800 times now, and I do it 130 times a year. And it's really just kind of taken off of goal setting from a different level. So that's kind of why. And then finally, you know, I'd finish doing the talk and people would say, okay, when's the book coming out? And I'm like, it's come full circle. I got it right. And so for the past 5 years, I've been in the process of trying to create the book written version of the workshop that you've experienced a couple of times. And now here we are, just a month or maybe two away from it being released. And it feels pretty good, even though I was, you know, dragged my feet for a decade. You know, anyone could lose a good decade here and now.
This is true. If you can, talk to us about, you know, your take on why it's important for leaders, wherever they're at, whether in their work environment, community, in their homes, to connect with their why and in their organization's why when leading.
Yeah. So for me, it goes kind of back to my career days. I spent most of my career in the oil and gas industry. I was with an American oil company that was eventually acquired by a multinational company, and that was the career that took us around the world. And I worked with a lot of different teams, and while I was kind of, the geek in me was a little bit jazzed about the work that we did. You know, what's the work of the oil industry? Well, we find petroleum reserves underground and we extract it to the surface, and then we refine it into products, and then we send the products out to the market and we sell it and make money. I mean, that's the what of the business. And that had a degree of excitement for me, but it didn't last for long. You know, it was like, all right, you know, it's all technical. What I did discover was that I was much more excited about why we did what we did. And so as I started leading teams, I was trying to get them away from whatever it was necessarily that we were up to, you know, whether it was making plastic products that were used in various applications, or whether it was the petroleum products themselves. And it's like, why is it we do what we do? And I started enrolling teams in conversations about that. And at first it was a little bit awkward. I wasn't really even fully sure. But then when I discovered the power that finding that why had on the team, I got pretty turned on by it too. I mean, for example, there was this team that I was leading in China for a while. And I came across a team next to us that was producing power from natural gas in China. And that's kind of an interesting thing. But when we got the team to have a conversation about why we were doing what we were doing, we looked around and we noticed that everybody was coming into work wearing masks, you know, just, you know, the kind of mask you or I would wear if we were dusting, you know, sanding something, right? I mean, but people wore those in Hong Kong and in mainland China all the time, because most of the power that's produced in China was from coal-fired plants, and all of the businesses and industries were doing the same thing. And so when factories were in full swing, the air was so thick and so polluted that people couldn't breathe. So they're wearing masks. And some of these folks had kids of their own, young kids, and their lungs are just developing. And some of them had older parents, and they were just having a hard time even getting their next breath in. And so when we said, you know, when we're successful with this natural gas marketing, you know, the air around us is going to become a little bit cleaner. People started no longer just working to, you know, produce natural gas and sell it. They started working so that their kids could breathe easier, or so that their mom and dad would live longer. And all of a sudden people are showing up early and they're staying late, and they had tapped into this connection between the why of our business with the why of what they were doing on a day-to-day basis. And you ended up getting this irrational loyalty from people. And so for me, that's really where it kind of connected. And I think why businesses need to do that on the good side of it. I also then had an experience a few years later that kind of taught me a little bit about the consequences of where things could go if you're actually not connecting and making conscience driven decisions, because you want to find your why. You can find it at a superficial level. You want to find the biggest why, the one that really gets to that level of motivation. And ultimately, you're going to be asking bigger and even deeper questions. Why does that matter? And once you get a good answer to that, you ask it a second time or a third time. And I had an experience where we were at an executive ed program, and we were put through this business simulation. And ultimately, the simulation was very simple, right? Run the most successful company you possibly can. And so we made decisions based on the data we had. And at the end of the simulation, frankly, we had all become complicit in the evil that was going around us, and we didn't even know it because we weren't asking deep enough questions. And a lot of that is what I talk a little bit about in the TEDx talk that's now available to the world, because I started talking it to groups like yours, and at the end of every talk, I was so emotionally exhausted that I couldn't do it anymore. So now it's available on TED. But so the connection for me on this, Eric, at the end of the day, is if we're not asking big enough, deep enough questions about our personal why and our corporate why, one of two things could happen. We could either find out that we've achieved goals that ultimately don't matter, and that'd be a bummer. We will have wasted this gift that we've been given called life. But there is something even worse than wasting it, and that's what I discovered in that thing, is that we could ultimately have become complicit in evil and making the world worse off because we haven't actually connected with those big, deep why things. And then we get caught up in what we think is the right thing to do, but it really ultimately wasn't the thing that would have satisfied us at the end of the day. So anyway, that's my long, you're only going to get long-winded answers from me today. I'm sorry.
I love it. No, I'm ready for it, baby. Off task a little bit from our script. Of course, we knew we were going down this avenue when we started, so it's no news to you. Can you share the story about you and your son?
Yeah, you're right. I wasn't prepared for that one, but I'll go there.
Okay.
And the reason this one comes up is that what I discovered over the years of doing this talk was we may have this desire. You dig deep enough and you're going to find what legacy you want to leave to the world and why you want to leave that legacy that matters. And it's out there. It's in the future, and it's bold and it's exciting. And then yet what I discovered was that we don't operate in a vacuum. I don't operate in a vacuum. Sometimes there's stuff back here in my past, back there, that maybe I haven't dealt with fully, and I'm not at peace with it. And if I'm not at peace with it here in my present, then that can hinder me from fulfilling that purpose out there and into the future that I really know I needed to breathe into existence. And I came across one of those through an ongoing association I have with a good friend and mentor of mine. He was the therapist that saw every member of the household in which I was raised for a lot of obvious reasons. And in my longer presentations, you'll find out all about the wonderful function and dysfunction of the home in which I grew up in, because I was born into a house with actors as parents, and there was quite a bit of drama in the home. So I've had a lifelong association with some counselors and therapists that have helped me clean up some of those messes and some of the stuff that I was hanging on to. Yeah. And one day I walked into my counselor's office, and he says, "All right, Pyle, who do you need to forgive today?" And I closed my eyes and I asked my conscience that question: who do I need to forgive? What's holding me back right now? Or is there any bitterness or resentment that I'm hanging on to? And surprisingly, that day it was my dad who came to mind. For context, after Dad left the Broadway stage as an actor, he had this big booming voice in the world. And after he left the stage, he became a business leader, right? He ran his own company, a production company. And then he became a turnaround CEO. Now go into this new company, turn it around, make it profitable. All those years he would travel in the turnaround jobs. I was a teenager at home. It was my job at home. I had to take care of the yard. I was a yard boy. Mow the grass, edge the sidewalks, weed the beds, yard boy. Inevitably, Dad would come home from his travels, and then he and I would take a tour around the yard. Always a very special bonding time for father and son. It could be 99% perfect. It didn't matter. Every tour had this outstanding moment of, hey, Brett, isn't that a weed over there? Right there. I think it's your job to weed the yard now, right here in the middle of it. Take some pride in your work, son. It's a weed. I said, Gene, who was the name of my counselor, Gene, it was a small thing, but I never really liked that weed moment on the tour. And Gene says, no, I can see how that might have hurt. And then he says, did you forgive him? Well, now I give him the pat answer that you and I have probably heard from 1,001 business leaders. You know, Gene, I got no regrets really about that. I'm kind of glad he did that. I do excellent work because I pay attention to detail. It's made me the person I am today. I'm really glad that was it. And he's been working with me long enough. He called me on it and he says, quit that. That's not forgiveness. That is rationalizing from the mind of an adult. Something that hurt when it happened as a kid. That's not forgiving it. Yeah, that's stuffing it. That's cramming it down. Mm-hmm. But to forgive, you got to own it. You got to go be the kid again. Be the kid. Feel the pain of your dad pointing out your inadequacy. Feel the pain, and from the place of pain, from the place of emotion, you have to forgive. And now, like Gene, I am messing with you. We've been doing the work a long time. Yeah. I felt the pain. I went right into the moment. I got present with my dad in the spirit because he was no longer around. And I said, Dad, you probably didn't mean that to hurt. But it really did. It felt like I was no good. It felt like I was worthless. And I forgive you. Yeah, so I went right back in the moment, felt the pain, and I uttered the words. But now my counselor, looks at me a little bit funny. He's like, you're right, that does sound like forgiveness. But if you did that, Brett, you ought to be looking light and free, like a burden has come off of you. But for some reason right now, you look like death warmed over. What's the problem? What's going on in you? And that's when it snuck up on me, just like it did a moment ago when you asked the question. And I said, well, Gene, here's the problem. I think I'm twice as bad with my boy as my dad ever was with me. And Gene gave me a minute, and I was reflecting on my relationship with my then 11-year-old son, who doesn't take care of my yard. I got a yard service for that. If you haven't figured out why, I can tell you later if you want. Yeah. But he does take care of the swimming pool we got in the backyard. It's his job to. And when I composed myself, Gene said, "Well, you want to know what I think happened?" And I'm like, "You're gonna tell me anyway. Go ahead." And he says, "Brett, I bet on one of those tours when your dad was pointing out your weeds and your inadequacy, I bet you said to him, maybe not out loud, but in your head, in your heart, I bet it sounded something like, I don't know, I hate you." You think? Yeah, I hate you. Nothing I ever do is good enough for you. I'll never be like you. Yeah. And Gene then offers me this great gift that changes my life. He says, well, that's the problem. When we're called to honor our parent, called to honor them, and when we dishonor them, we're breaking a law, not a physical law. You drop a pen, it'll fall because gravity's there. But you dishonor your parent and then vow you're not going to be like them. And in the spiritual realm, what you've done is curse yourself to become exactly like them. This is why addicts beget addicts. It's why abusers abuse people. And it goes down through the generations and we pass it on, right? And it's so totally disconnected from the legacy that I really wanted to leave. But I hadn't dealt with this stuff back there in my past. And so I was becoming exactly what I didn't want to be. And so it was by owning that and then by cleaning it up and making it right with my boy that I created a clearing around myself. And then I was free to leave that legacy that I really wanted to do. So that's the story. And it's this thing that connects me to the whole why as well. We are not human beings that occasionally have a spiritual, awakening. We are at the fundamental core of it all. We are spiritual beings that are having a temporary human experience that is going to end soon. Mm-hmm. And in the end, will anything we have done actually mattered? Or might we have not mattered, or worse than not mattering, might we have become complicit in evil because we haven't really set goals from listening? And so here's the other cool thing about 2020 vision, and I'll leave this with you for your listeners. Is I guess this might be the final podcast of the year on 2020.
It is.
You know, there's this great phrase. It was written in Hebrew years and years, thousands of years ago, and it was, "Without a vision, the people will perish."
Yes.
And so, you know, many business leaders and even individuals will take that and say, "Oh, good, it's my job then to create a vision. I have to create the vision for what my life is going to be about or what my organization is going to be about." The more you dig into the translation there, it's not really all that accurate. It's not so much a vision that's our responsibility. The better translation is, "Without a revelation, the people cast off restraint." And as you think about the difference between a vision and a revelation, we think about it as a vision. And of course, we think it's our responsibility to come up with a vision. What do I want? And we start with our wants and our needs. But if we look at the word more as a revelation, then we realize that the visioning thing isn't even our responsibility at all. Somebody else is going to own that. It's our responsibility to get ourselves in a position where we have a sweet, intimate relationship with this guidance system called our conscience. Yeah. And depending upon your faith tradition, you may think your conscience is that still small voice in the back of your head. You know it your whole life and it comes from you. Or you may actually think that the conscience is quite literally the voice of God. And what perfect Heavenly Father wouldn't want his kids to know his voice really clearly? Either way, whether it's God's voice or this voice in the back of your head, you have this first person, third party relationship with it. And that's the voice that we're listening to when we're listening for that vision. And we just need to be positioned so that when that voice reveals the vision that we're really meant to fulfill while we're here on earth, that we're positioned to hear it. And then when we hear it, we get off of our own agenda and get onto that agenda. And then I think we can fundamentally change the world. Yeah. So that's my final take on 2020's vision thing.
Okay.
What if we each went into this visioning process a little less intentionally about what I want and more about listening to the voice of our conscience and waiting for it to speak, and then when it does speak, being prepared to set aside all of our wants to serve a purpose that's larger than ourselves. Because our mind will never give us that. You know why your mind can't tell you what your purpose is? Because our mind is the seat of our ego. And the ego wants only two things. It wants us to be separate, and it wants us to be superior. I'm glad I have an ego. It has kept me alive. But you listen to your conscience, and it will tell you not what you need or want, but what the world at large needs, what other people need or want. And I'm glad I have one of those too. And between the two of those things, man, it makes me all of who I am. Right. So anyway, that would be my final take on the need to connect with our conscience as we're setting things like vision and just listening for it to reveal it.
If people were to do this, and again, just so viewers and listeners are aware, I mean, you have a whole presentation on this. We're really narrowing this down to just a few minutes, and I love the presentation. But one of the things that I've always had in front of me, and I mean in front of me, is this little sheet right here from Mr. Pyle. And I've always believed in the why. And the first time I heard you, we went around and just after you were done, and we said, "Hey, what did you get out of Brett's talk today in our group that you came to present to?"
Yeah.
And I remember what I said that day.
What'd you say?
Validation. Because for me, I do things differently. I'm quirky, but I am who I am. And when I wrote this down and went through this exercise, and you refined it, and it's going to be in the book, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I want you to chime in here with those three things people can be thinking about for the new year, as far as connecting their why to that new vision for 2020 that they're going to have. And it's before I leave planet Earth. Before I leave planet Earth.
Yeah.
What do they need to do?
Yeah. What must I do before I leave planet Earth? You know, you ask your mind that question, it will tell you a variety of different things you need to get all the things that you want. But if you ask your conscience that question, what do I need to do before I leave planet Earth? And then wait silently for an extended period of time. And by that, I mean, it may take 20 minutes. And the first things you start hearing generally from that exercise will probably not be from your conscience. It'll be your mind, and your mind will give you something. And because your mind's very quick, if that happens, don't panic, don't get frustrated, and don't think you've heard. Acknowledge the sharing. You say, all right, well, thank you for sharing. And your mind will say, you're welcome. I'm brilliant, aren't I? And you can say, yes, you are. I love you. And then once you acknowledge your mind will get quiet. It'll get quiet. And then remain in that silence and ask it again. Before I leave planet Earth, what must I do? And keep waiting. You will eventually hear from your conscience. You will. How will you know when it has spoken to you? You get choked up, right? You get fired up. Some sort of an emotion is going to kick in. And when the emotion kicks in, take the emotion up to your intellect and let your intellect, your mind, invite your mind back into the conversation and ask it a question about the emotion. Hey, why do I get so choked up when I think about doing this thing? Dancing with my daughter at her wedding, or handing this business off to the next generation of leaders who can take it further than I ever imagined. Why does that fire me up like it does? Yeah. Let your mind process the emotion. And then eventually your mind's going to give you this gift. It's going to activate your hand, right? And you'll have a written goal, like the one that showed up in your workbook. Yeah. And that's this incredibly powerful thing, because most goal setting is a half being goal. It's set from your mind and it's set from your physical body. But when you start with your conscience first, and then let the emotions come over you, and then let your mind process those emotions. So this is this thing we call conscience-centered goal setting. And I think it makes all the difference. And when you got a guy like you that, has been living that way for a while, then it comes across to you as validation. And that's why you felt that. Mm-hmm. And so here's one final thing for your listeners, and I'm going to brag on you a little bit, because I ran into this guy out at a conference that we were both a part of. And during one of the breaks, I'm walking past, and I just hear Eric talking to some guy. And here are the words I hear coming out of his mouth. And you probably won't want me to say this, because you probably like getting paid for your services. But I remember the guy just saying something, and all I heard you say back is, dude, you don't have to pay me for this. I love you, and I'm happy to do it for you. Pay me when you can. And I walked by him later. I'm like, there you go, being you again. That's why it's validating for you, right? I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, and you make such a good point, because I've had this for years, Brett, and I've been fortunate because my wife's heard you speak to at a retreat, and I've been around different friends at different times where you've talked. But that piece about the emotional piece, because I read this to my internal staff, and every time, still to this day, and I'm looking at it now, I can't look at it and start reading it. Even if I read it in my head, I start getting emotional about it. And in this page, when I'm having a down day, I can't do it in my head. I have to do it with my heart. It picks me up and says, stay the course. This is why you're doing it. This is why you started all this years and years ago.
All right, man. Well, you put me on the spot, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
What's that?
Read it to us.
The whole thing?
Just the why. Why are you doing what you're doing, man?
All right, thank you. Thank you for being a little bit gracious, so I can't do the whole thing. All right, why is that important to me before I leave planet Earth?
Or go ahead, start with the what if you'd rather. What must you do before you leave planet Earth? What's that what? And then give us the why, and then we'll have the whole context.
Right. I have it down. I want to create a community of love, peace, and compassion. We want to build a sanctuary or a compound, not the weird kind, where people come and are helped and healed, and have extraordinary resources to go and teach anywhere at any time to anyone. And why those are important to me, because we and I'll include my wife and my staff in that, we want to empower people to become their authentic self and use their gifts in responsible ways, so we can change the world, so that everyone can experience the blessing of what it means to live a life of love and to experience this thing we call family. Whew.
You got a bigger why behind that one?
I just feel that when
Yeah, it comes, and it comes through a video screen.
Yeah, and I mean, I do it, and that's why I walked that very first time. And again, I could listen to you over again if. And a matter of fact, you're going to be up here in January in Pittsburgh, and I could just go to that again and listen to the same. That's how powerful this is for people. When you connect that why to what you do, it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
I really do believe that. And you talked about leaving a legacy. It leaves a legacy for people.
Yeah.
And you encourage other people to do that, so you get a lot more good than evil.
Yeah. That's my why, brother.
All right. And then before we end, can you tell people how to get in touch with you, so you can again, you're going to be up here in Pittsburgh, so if anybody's interested in that, they can get a hold of you or me.
Yeah.
And I'll get connected with you there. But how can they get in touch with you? And then tell us when your book's coming out, man.
Yeah, so the book's probably going to get released in January, February. It's connected into vision. So what better thing than 2020 vision? And I love the theme that you're doing this month. So we might as well release that thing in 2020. And the best place to go probably to get any details about me or the book and the availability would just be my website, brettpyle.com, BRETTPYLE.com. The book has its own website, but we're going to kind of connect the two of those things here soon. The book will be available on Amazon, but if people want to purchase in quantity, they should reach out to me. I can give them a better price probably than Amazon can. But and again, the final thing on this whole thing and why you could hear me again is because it has nothing to do with me. All I'm doing is creating an environment, a safe environment where you can have a conversation with your conscience, and then it can lead you. And so when people come and they expect to hear from me, and what they actually discover is that they're not hearing from me, but they're hearing that which their conscience is speaking. That's why it's impactful, right? So as much as I'd love to take the credit, I can't. My job just to introduce the meeting and then get out of the way and let the magic happen.
Yeah, and thanks. And I'm going to leave everybody with a quote, and I believe it is a quote that you quote in your talk. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how.
Yeah.
The why has to be strong. So that's all for today, folks. Brett, man, thanks. I hope we can have you back, after that book comes out with some other things, because it's so powerful what you do and what you give to other people, because you give it from your heart. It's very genuine, and I love you and love what you do. But make sure you leave this video a like and leave a comment down in the comment section below. We'd also appreciate if you'd hit the subscribe button as well as the bell icon to get notified when we post next. If you'd like more information, you can go to centerforvictory.com. If you'd like more information on Brett, you can go to his website, brettpyle.com. Or you can give us a call at 724-462-8383. And just remember, wherever you're at, wherever you're going, make this your best day yet. See you later.
Take care, buddy.